Scotty. Sorry, it seemed to be not functioning right, but I think it's finally going to come around here. This video is going to be teaching you how to trace a drop of blood around the body. Let me get my pen. You've got some pages in your study guide that I would like for you to be sure and look at. They're going to be very helpful in explaining to you why you need to know this and how to approach it. We have discovered that learning how to trace a drop of blood through the pathway of the heart, the lungs, and back out to the systems and wherever it's going is so important, especially in the health field, because you're going to be dealing with things that are moving through the blood, and you have to understand exactly how they get there and how they get back, and then if there's a problem in the blood, where that problem might possibly present itself first, because you know your circulation well. I want you to think of the circulatory system as being a highway. It's really, they're the highways and byways of our bodies, and just like highways, we've got bigger ones and we've got smaller ones and we've got little tiny ones. I want you to think about how if you're going to go visit somebody, you're going to be possibly, maybe if it's in another state, let's say that it's someone you're going to visit in another state. You would tend to go from your little neighborhood streets to your city or county streets to your state roads and to your interstates. And then you go so far on the interstates, then you will start getting closer to where you'll need to be watching because your exit's coming up. You want to make sure you exit in the right exit, or you know how it is. You may go on forever and never be able to turn around. In the body, since we have a closed loop system, you miss your exit, you've missed your exit. You don't get a chance to turn around and go back and try to catch it, because you'll see as we get along the way there. But as you get off on the exits, and maybe one exit splits, and you want to make sure you know which exit to take from there, and then maybe you're in town and you're going down these roads, and it says, for instance, I know in my neighborhood, I sometimes have to remember to tell people when they get to a stop sign that I want them to turn left on Forest Street, but if they turn right, they're turning onto Nick Davis when it's actually the same road. It's just that that stop sign, the name changes, and I've had people sometimes look the wrong direction and not see the name I'm trying to give them to turn onto, and they think they haven't reached the intersection yet, and so they go on by and they've not made it. So, you know, the names are going to change in the blood vessels even though you're still on the same main pathway, so I want you to understand that. And I think when Ms. Woods did the circulation to the heart, through the heart, she may have used this very slide that I have up now, but this is, if you learn your pathways beginning at your right atrium and going from there to your lungs and back and out the aorta, that's 75% of any tracings of the blood, and it's always the same, no matter where you go in the systemic circulation. So let's make sure that, let's review that so that you know exactly what I want you to name if you start in the right atrium. So the right atrium's right here, and you've got incoming blood here from the inferior and superior vena cava. Remember that? So if you start the right atrium, I will want you to name this valve next. What valve is that? Tricuspid valve. Blood will then go down into what chamber? Right ventricle. From the right ventricle, it's going to go out past this valve. What valve is that? Pulmonic semilunar valve. Through the pulmonic semilunar valve into the pulmonary trunk, and then it will either go into the right or the left pulmonary artery, depending upon whether it's going to the right lung or the left lung. This schematic just shows a vessel going to the lungs, both of them. When you're in the middle of the lungs and the vessels begin to get smaller and smaller as they branch, we call these arterioles. Notice, by the way, that the blood on the right side that's heading to the lungs is going by way of an artery, but it's a blue one. Why is that? Because the word artery only tells you what? That blood flow is going where? Away from the heart. And the blue is just telling you that it's oxygen poor, CO2 rich blood. So we're heading to the lungs to do what? To get rid of that CO2 and pick up the oxygen. And that's going to happen when you get to the tiniest little branches, excuse me, in the lungs called the capillary beds. You're going to have gaseous exchange here. And then these tiny little capillaries are going to start growing back together to form larger vessels still inside the lungs that we call pulmonary venules. Notice this word is spelled a little different. It's not venules. It doesn't have an I in it. It's not V-E-I-N. It's V-E-N, venules. So the venules start growing together, and what does a vein become? They all join up finally till you get to some pulmonary veins. Actually, you're going to have 2 pulmonary veins coming into the heart from each lung, 4 altogether. What does the word vein tell you? Blood flow how? I hope you all are all saying this to yourselves at home, but blood flow toward the heart. What does the color red tell you? Because notice the artist has got red here. Red simply means that it's got oxygen in it and doesn't have very much CO2 in it. So the blood coming back into the heart on the left side is coming back saturated with oxygen, thus the color red, and it's coming back via pulmonary veins. The pulmonary veins come into the upper chamber on the left side called the what? Left atrium, pass through this valve called bicuspid or mitral. If you're going into the medical profession, please remember mitral. That's what's going to be used most often. So you pass through the mitral valve and into what chamber? Left ventricle. And then you're going to go out. I've got it to where you can't even see that. Let me see if I can erase a little bit of my drawing here. Isn't it going to let me erase? There we go. Pick up my pen again. See this set of valves right here? The blood is going to leave the left ventricle and go up through those valves, and they're what? They're going into the aorta, thus part of their name. Aortic, and then their type is semilunar. So those valves are the aortic semilunar valves, ASLV. And then you're out the aorta. So if you will first learn the pathway that I just went through, from the right atrium to the lungs and back out the aorta, that part is always the same no matter where you go. So let's say it one more time together without me interrupting with all these things. You'll start with the right atrium, then you'll go through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. Right ventricle is going to pass blood up through this set of valves right here, which are the pulmonic semilunar valves. Pulmonic semilunar valves into the pulmonary trunk. That splits into the right or left pulmonary artery. Either lung, doesn't matter. Go to the lungs. Those start branching and become pulmonary arterioles, then pulmonary capillaries, where gaseous exchange occurs. Then those capillaries start getting bigger, growing together to form pulmonary venules. The venules start growing together to form pulmonary veins. That comes into this chamber, which is what? Left atrium, passing down through this valve, mitral valve, into this chamber, left ventricle, and out this valve, which is the aortic semilunar valve and aorta. So if you will learn that, then the rest of it you will pick up, because that part's always the same. You need to have that part down pat, and then the rest of it I think I can explain with the next few slides how we take it to various parts and where the things are different. But notice The systemic circulation then is going to go to the capillary beds of all the body tissues where it can give up the oxygen it's picked up in the lungs, pick up the CO2 to take back to the lungs, and so you're coming out to the tissues by way of an arteries, because and they're red because they've got oxygen in them, and then you're coming back into the heart after you've exchanged for the CO2 into veins that are blue because they've got CO2 in them. So let's go to the next picture. Same thing. Then one of the things I wanted to show you on this is that your pulmonary veins, which are coming back in here from each lung, there's actually 4 of them that come into the left atrium here. You can't, this left atrium kind of goes all the way around behind the back of the heart, so you don't think that because these 2 are here that they're going to empty into the right atrium. These 2 are running to the back and emptying into that left atrium. This does a better job of showing you how you know whether you're in an AV valve versus the semilunars, which are here. The AV valves are the ones that are between the atria and the ventricle, and they're going to have the chorda tendineae on them, and they're going to be anchored into the wall where there's so much force pulled on them to keep these valves from turning inside out and allowing backflow. You create these bulges in the wall called the papillary muscles. You see it here. You're going to see this in the heart you dissect as well in lab. This picture is really good because it also shows how much thicker the left ventricle wall is compared to the right ventricle wall. This is your septum. Probably Ms. Woods did this, but interventricular septum. So let's review what we just did. Here we've got blood coming in from the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava into the right atrium, through the mitral valve, into the right ventricle, out by way of the pulmonic semilunar valve, which is here. Pulmonary trunk splits, going to the right and the left lung. Then you go through the lung arterioles, capillaries, venules. Now they're coming back together into pulmonary veins. You're going to have 2 pulmonary veins from each lung coming into what? Left atrium, past this valve, which is which valve? This is the mitral on the left side, down into this chamber, which is the left ventricle. Blood is then going to go out this semilunar valve, which goes kind of in the middle of the heart and up and behind that pulmonary. It's going to be in the aorta. So that pulmonary, that valve is the aortic semilunar valve back up in there, and then you go out the aorta. Now we're going to be getting to the next one in a minute, and one of the things I want to point out that one of the decisions you have to make when you get to the top of the arch is, do I want to go to the head or the arms? If I want to go to the head of the arms, I'm going to take one of these 3 exits right here. And since we're talking about getting to these exits as the blood flows, we're going to call this the first exit, this the second exit, and this the third exit. Okay? It's going to be important in a minute. But if you want to either go up to the right side of the head or the right arm, you're going to take the first exit. And that first exit is called the brachiocephalic artery. Why brachiocephalic, do you think? What's brachio mean? Arm, cepha, head. So this exit is going to come up and then it's going to split again. So right shortly after getting on the brachiocephalic artery, you've got to decide whether you're going up to the right side of the head or going down the right arm, because you take another exit, and we'll see more about that in just a minute. If you're going to the left side of the head, you're going to the left side of the head, left brain, or the left outside part of the head, you're going to take the second exit. Because the second exit goes straight up the left carotid artery. So at the top of the arch here, if you take this exit, you're going to be destined to go up to the head through the carotid artery on the left side. If you come on around and you decide to take the third exit, then if you're going to the third exit, the third exit is the left subclavian. And what does that tell you? Sub is under, clavy, clavicle. So this is under the clavicle, and when the blood vessel is under the clavicle, it's destined to head down the arm, okay? So that's an important thing. Let's see what we have next on here. Okay, don't let this scare you, please. You're going to learn how to get to various parts of the body out in the systemic circulation. And this schematic, you've got one in your book, so find it, of the arteries in the systemic circulation and their names. You have a list of the ones we want you to know in your study guide. You're also going to have the same, a different picture showing the veins. But let me tell you, don't get caught up in all these names. Let me give you an example. If I ask you where the brachial artery is, where do you think you would find it on your body? Can you point to a place on your body? What's brachial mean? Upper arm? So yeah, brachial is going to be here. What if I said, where's the axillary artery or vein? Well, axillary is what? Armpit region. So you're going to be in this area. The deltoid's kind of on the top, and your armpit's on the bottom, and when the blood vessel's here, you're in the axillary region. The blood vessels are like highways, remember. And as long as you're on the main highway, like the main interstate, the highway name may change, but as it in a local area, but you're still on the same highway. So as you leave the chest and you're heading down the arm, you're going to go through subclavian, then it's going to be called axillary, then it's going to be called brachial, and then when you get to the elbow, what's going to happen? You're going to have a split that goes down these two bones right here, one of them being on your thumb side and one on your little finger side. So if you're heading down the thumb, which exit are you going to take? Remember the bone name? That's what? Radius, right? So the artery is called the radial artery. If you want to go down toward the little finger, you're going to take the other exit, and up here after brachial, you're going to take the exit that goes down the ulnar artery, which is by the ulna, the bone. And there's lots of vessels that branch down in the hands. Palmar is what I see right here. And then when they get into the fingers, they're called digital. We're not worried about you tracing specific vessels down in the hands. But what I am going to do is practice going down the arm, going up the head in a minute. If you're in the leg, what if I ask you to tell me where the iliac region is? Can you tell me where the iliac artery and vein is? I hope you know by now that it gets its name because it's down here in the pelvic region by the ilium, the bones. If you go down the leg a little bit, where do you think you'd find the femoral artery and the returning blood in the femoral vein? Lying next to what? The femur. What if I told you to find the popliteal artery and vein? Where do you think you'd look? In the knee. What about if I ask you to go to the anterior tibial artery? What's anterior tell you? The front of the body, tibial, in front of the tibia. What if I said posterior tibial? Right, you'd go to the back of the leg, behind the tibia. So I don't want you to look at all these and think, oh my gosh, look at all those words I got to learn, because you already know them. If you don't, you better go back to 201 because that's where all these words were introduced to you. I'm going to show you the other one on the veins. And one of the things that I want you to notice is there's a lot more branches in the return circulation of both the arms and the legs than there were in the artery picture you saw, and that's simply to make sure that blood does get back, because you're not going to be able to keep blood pumping if you don't have blood returning to the right atrium of the heart. So if there's a possibility of a vessel getting blocked, your venous return is kind of redundant. There's places, especially down the legs and even in the arms, where there's more than one way back. When we are learning how to trace a drop of blood, you're going to see that I want you to stick with the main pathways. So we're not, if a vessel splits into an internal and an external, I'm not going to make you say whether you're going to the internal or the external. If you know the major pathway and how to get there and how to get back and what all that means, then once you learn that, if somebody talks to you about the internal carotid versus the external carotid, I surely hope you will realize that the external carotid is going to go up and feed the outside of your head, and the internal carotid is going to go up into your head to the brain. So you should just be able to use some common sense. But the hard part here, it's really not that hard, but the first part you've got to learn is to really understand circulation, and then the rest of it will fall into place. So without further ado, let's try some. Let's do a circulation to the head and back. All right, we're assuming now that you've started this pattern here in the right atrium. Remember, right atrium, tricuspid valve, right ventricle, out your pulmonic semilunar valve, pulmonary trunk, pulmonary artery to the lungs, and back into arterioles, capillaries, venules, pulmonary vein, back over here to the left side, through the mitral valve into the left ventricle, out. Now you're going through the aortic semilunar valve, and here we find ourselves back in the aorta. So remember, that pathway is always the same. But here we come up the aorta right here. And you could call this part the ascending aorta if you want to, because ascending is just referring to blood going up, and the only place the blood is going upward is from that valve, the aortic semilunar valve, up to the arch. And then you could say aortic arch. So then what you've got to decide, like we were looking at a minute ago, is when you get to the arch, you've got to decide, am I going to the right side of the head, or am I going to the left side of the head? Let's assume we're going to the right side of the head, okay? We would want to take this first exit. This branch right here that soon divides here and here into two different ways for blood to flow is called the brachiocephalic, I just did this, artery. You only have one of those because the left side, whether you go to your head or whether you go to your arm, have their own exit. So you don't have this joined vessel called the brachiocephalic artery on the left. You only have it on the right. So you don't have to say right. You just say brachiocephalic artery because there's only one. So the brachiocephalic artery, if we're going to the head, we're going to go from the aortic arch into the brachiocephalic artery. Then we're going to go up. We're going to take this exit up what? The carotid artery. And even though there's lots of branches, and you can look at any picture in your book and see all these branches, I'm not worried about you learning all these branches in the head. My point is mostly to get the general pattern of circulation. Should you ever need to know a lot about the brain circulation, you can surely pick it up another time. I think it will be fairly simple to do that. So let's make sure you've got your circulation right. You come up your carotid artery. It's going to split, like I said, into an internal and an external. Don't worry about it. Just call it the carotid artery. Once we get up here in the head and these start branching, we're going to call the smallest branches the arterioles. And we could say the brain arterioles if you want to. We can just take it to the brain. We're going to which brain, though? Which side did we choose? Which side has the brachiocephalic artery? Well, here we're taking it to the right brain, okay? So going through the arterioles, what do you say next? Capillaries. What do you say after capillaries? Venules, okay? And then you're on your U-turn and you're heading back down. But since the artist chose to draw the venous return over here, then we're switching to this picture for the venous return. But I want you to think of those two pictures as overlapping, because really the arteries and the veins are all lying together, right, inside our body. So I want you to imagine overlapping these two pictures. So after you've gone through venules, then these vessels are going to start returning blood, and it doesn't matter whether you're going through the internal or the external. I want you to come back by this vessel. That's the jugular. One of these I just marked as the internal and one is the external. Do not worry about which is what. When you come back into circulation, notice how this vessel, which is under the collarbone or clavicle, is meeting up with the jugular, whether it be internal or external, and forming a little branch together. This is called the right brachiocephalic vein. So it's where the subclavian and the jugular come together that forms the brachiocephalic. And then your right and your left brachiocephalic come together to form this major vessel called what? The superior vena cava. Okay? How about that? If you go up the right side of the head, that was the right, wasn't it? Am I getting mixed up? No, I was on the right side. If you go up the left side of the head, then you go from the aortic arch into the second exit, which is the carotid. And then you go up and say the arterioles, capillaries, venules of the carotid. And now we're coming back on the other side here. We're going to go through capillaries and venules, and then we're going to come back through the jugular vein. And the jugular vein, again, whether it's internal, external, doesn't matter, is going to join the subclavian to form this section. This is going to be your left brachiocephalic vein. And then it joins with the right one to form the superior vena cava, and you're back in your right atrium. All right. So that kind of explains that. What if you're going down the arm? Let me see if I have a different picture for the arm. I think I do. Yeah. Okay. Let's go on. A lot of these tracings, maybe not all of them, but a lot of these tracings are found in examples in your study guide. All right. Now, let's again imagine these two drawings as overlapping. It's just, you can see how messy it would get. And I want you to remember that we're going to stay in the main vessel. So we're going to stay in this one in the middle coming back, but basically you're just retracing your steps. Let's go down the right arm first. So this is the right arm. So we're going to go down the right arm. And so we're going to come out the aortic semilunar valve, the ascending aorta, and the aortic arch, and then we're going to take the first exit to go right. Remember, anatomical right. The first exit is called what? The right brachiocephalic artery. Right brachiocephalic artery. Then it's going to split, and you're wanting to stay in this major part right here that runs under the collarbone, so it's going to be the right subclavian. And then when you get into this area, under the armpit, you're going to be in what? The right axillary artery. Then as you go a little bit further down, you're going to call this the right, what? Brachial. And then it splits here at the elbow. Here's your thumb side, so this would be the right radial. And if you decide to go this direction instead of that direction and go down to the little finger, you would be in the right ulnar. So coming back, we want to stay, we're just going to reverse our names, and we're going to stay in the main one in the middle. These others have names. There's a cephalic artery. Don't ask me why it's called that. And there's a basilic artery, vein, not cephalic vein, cephalic vein, not cephalic artery, and basilic, I think, vein. But you're just wanting to retrace your steps. I do want to point out, for you guys going into nursing in particular, that we decided to put this median cubital vein as an extra one for you to learn, simply because that's one you're going to do a lot of venipunctures with, so you probably need to know that. But don't worry about putting that in any of the tracings. Okay, now notice I've said let's go to a muscle or a bone in the arm. So let's take the right arm and let's go down to, let's say the brachialis, let's go down to the deltoid muscle, for instance. Where's the deltoid muscle? It's this big shoulder muscle, right? So what you want to do is you want to go down the right subclavian and go to the right axillary. Once you're at that main area where the deltoid is, then you're wanting to take an exit off of the axillary and get into the arterioles of this muscle. So an example would be, once we've traced our pattern again, that's always the same, from the right atrium, the right ventricle, out to the lungs, back to the left atrium, left ventricle, and out the aorta. If we're going to go down the right arm and we're going to go to the deltoid, then we're going to say aorta, maybe aortic arch. You don't have to say that. Then you're going to take the first exit, which is what? The brachiocephalic artery. Remember there's only one, so you don't have to say right or left. There's only one artery. So you take the brachiocephalic artery. Then when you get to this junction right here, you don't want to go up. You want to go down the arm. So you're going to take the right subclavian, and then you're going to get down here into the armpit region, and this vessel is called the right axillary. All right, this is where you're going to take a detour here. You're going to get off of this artery, and you're going to go into the deltoid arterioles. Then you're going to say deltoid what? Capillaries, then deltoid venules, and now you're coming out of the venules back into the axillary what? Remember, just retrace your steps. You're going in the opposite direction now, and you're going back on the opposite side of the road from where you came. So you're just retracing your steps. So you get back into the axillary vein, then you go into this region, which is what? The right, remember we're on the right side, right subclavian vein. And then the right subclavian is going to join the jugular to form this section. That section's what? The right brachiocephalic vein. And then the two brachiocephalic veins go together to form the next thing you should say, which is the superior vena cava. And now you're back into the right atrium. Let's pretend we're going a little further down, and let me explain a little bit more. Let's say you're going to go to the, you're going to nourish the thumb, okay? Since we're not making you learn any of the major vessel names in your hand, then what would you do? Let's go down the left side to be different. Let's say we're going to go down and get to the left thumb. So now we want to wind up coming down here to the left thumb. So we're wanting to go out this way and all the way down to get to the left thumb like that. So what would you name? You'd start with the aorta here, and you would be taking what exit off the top of the arch? The third one, remember? Because the third one has its own exit into the left subclavian. And then you would say left what? Axillary. Then you get down to the middle here of the upper arm, and you are in the left what? Brachial. And then it splits right here, and you want to take which exit? You want to go into the left radial, since we're going to the thumb, because the radius is on the thumb side. When you get to the thumb then, from the left radial artery, you're going to go into the arterioles, capillary venules of the thumb, and now you're back over here on this side. So switch over here. The venules come back. You stay on your thumb side. You're going to go back up the radial vein, the left radial vein. The left radial vein is going to come back up here, joining with the ulnar to form the left brachial vein. Then you're going to come up here to the armpit region. It's going to be called the left axillary vein. And then that goes under the collarbone, the left subclavian vein. And then it's going to join that incoming road that's called the jugular. They form the left brachiocephalic vein, and the two come together to form the superior vena cava, and you're back home. All right. I don't know how many more of these I can do. I'm beginning to wear out. All right, let's go to down the leg, but let's make it quick if we can. If you're in the aorta, once you pass through the diaphragm, then you are now in the abdominal aorta. And you can say descending. From the time you leave the arch and the blood is flowing down to here, that's also called the descending aorta. So either way, it really doesn't matter. But it's nice for you to let us know whether, like if you wanted to say, I'm still in the thorax, you'd call that the thoracic aorta. The thoracic aorta is just the part of the aorta that's superior to the diaphragm. If you start calling it abdominal aorta, it's passed through the diaphragm and down. And so all of your internal organs come off of that aorta in the abdomen. When you get down in the pelvic region, you're going to have some branches of it that are going to go either down the legs or to other organs, you know, down low, the bladder and stuff like that. Once you get here to this split, though, you got to decide. It really won't matter whether you're going to the right or the left leg, but it branches to form the iliac artery. When it passes out of the body cavity and you're now running along this bone, what's it called? Femoral artery. When you get to the knee region, what's the vessel called? Popliteal artery. And then the Pearson book just identifies two major splits in the lower leg. The whole book from McGraw-Hill shows three, so I'm going to teach you all three. You can either go down the front of the tibia. If you're on the front of the tibia, you're going to be in the tibialis anterior artery, or anterior, I'm sorry, that tibialis anterior is the muscle you're going to get. This is called, is the anterior tibial artery. Anterior tibial artery. Okay. All right. If you from the popliteal, if you go to the back of the leg, you're going to be in the posterior tibial artery. If you go down the fibula on this side, the lateral surface of the leg, that's the third major split. You're going to be in either the fibular artery or it's sometimes called peroneal artery. Okay? So once you leave the knee, it's either going to go to the front of the leg, anterior tibial, or you take the exit to the back of the leg, posterior tibial, or you take the exit that goes down toward the fibula, which would be the fibular artery. And then I want you to remember that what we're doing again is naming just the major routes back. So you're going to have the fibular vein. If you went down that side, you're going to come back up through the fibular vein. If you went down the front of the leg, you're going to be in the anterior tibial vein coming back. If you go down the back of the leg, you're going to come back by way of the posterior tibial. Then you go through popliteal, and then you go through femoral. When the femoral vein enters the body pelvic area, you're going to be in the iliac vein. Then your two iliac veins join together to form the inferior vena cava that's going to go back into the right atrium of the heart. You have a lot of other venous returns down here. The biggest vessel that is often removed in people who have varicose veins in the leg is the great saphenous. Vein. So you have a lot of redundant systems and backup systems to make sure the blood's going to get back, find a way back, even if you have something obscuring that circulation. But when you trace a drop of blood, do not use great saphenous, please. I want to make sure that you understand that most of the time, you know, I want you to understand your flow, so I want you to get back the same way you went down. So let's take an example. Let's go down to the knee, okay? We're going to go out the aorta, and we're going to take the descending aorta through the abdominal aorta, and it doesn't matter whether you take the right or the left iliac. You're going to go down the iliac artery, down the femoral artery, and you're going to go to the knee at the popliteal artery. When you get to the knee, what do you say? You're going to leave the popliteal artery, and you're going to go into the smaller vessels that are nourishing the knee. So you say popliteal arterioles, popliteal capillaries, popliteal venules. Now you're coming back, and so you get back into the popliteal vein. Now you're on this side, and you're retracing your steps from popliteal vein, femoral vein, iliac vein, inferior vena cava, and back into the right atrium. How about that? If you stop anywhere along the way, remember, let's say if you go to the quads, which are the upper leg, what would be the last, let's go back here since we're going. If we're coming down and going to the quads, what would be the last vessel you would name before you get off the exit? You should be in the femoral artery. If you go to the quads, which is in front of the femur, you're going to go femoral artery, arterioles, capillaries, venules. Remember, now you're U-turning. I tell people all the time, whatever you do, don't jump down. Don't jump to the opposite side of the road. You got to keep that pattern going all the way through. So you would go from iliac artery, femoral artery, take the exit off to the quads, into the femoral arterioles, capillaries, and venules of the quadriceps muscles. Then you go from there back into the femoral side. You're on the opposite side of the road now. You're not in the artery now. You're on the venous side. So now you say femoral vein, iliac vein, inferior vena cava, right atrium, and you're back. All right, let's move on. I'm not going to trace every single one of these things, but there's a couple here I wanted to point out. If you're on the gonads and you come, let's start with the kidney. I want to do that first. When you get through when the artery comes in here, the aorta comes into the abdominal cavity here at the hiatus where it passes through the diaphragm. It's going to take either the right or the left, it doesn't matter, renal artery. Then you're going to go through the blood flow in the renal artery. And for now, we'll just say arterioles, capillaries, and venules. We're going to learn a little more about kidney blood flow in the last unit. But then when it comes back out, you're over here on this side. So what are you going to be in? Renal vein, and the renal veins, both of them join into the what? What's this big vessel? Inferior vena cava, and back up to the right atrium. If you're in the gonads, which are going to the testes or the ovaries, you see this branch right here and right here. This is your right and left gonadal. So it doesn't matter which side you're on when you go down, but it's going to make a difference when you come back, because I want to show you something. Your right gonadal comes directly into the inferior vena cava, whereas your left gonadal, notice what it does. It joins right here with the left renal vein before coming back into the inferior vena cava. So it does make a difference whether you're going down the right or the left testes or ovaries, because your return trip is going to be different on the two different sides. Let's see what we have next. Okay, in the systemic circulation, something that I haven't talked about yet is we have a special circulation within the systemic circulation called portal. This is within the systemic circulation. And basically what it is where all blood returning from digestive organs must pass through the liver, so that whatever's been absorbed by any of your digestive organs can be processed before dumping back into the inferior vena cava. So it must pass through the liver first for processing. Sometimes the liver may be removing some toxins you might have absorbed. Sometimes it's disassembling things you don't need. Sometimes it's taking things you got too much of and storing them, reorganizing them. Remember that your liver is a hugely metabolic organ. And so it's going to process all this stuff that's in the blood before putting it back into the rest of the circulation. So this is what's called portal. Portal is where all that digestive, all the return blood coming from the digestive or any digestive organ is going to the liver for processing before being, I'm going to say, dumped into the inferior vena cava. Okay? So don't worry about this schematic. Other than this, some of the vessels that you're going to hear in the hepatic portal system are going to be these. You're going to have a hepatic portal vein. Hepa means what? Liver. So it's a portal to the liver. It's all that same. Coming into that is a superior mesenteric vein. You're going to have two mesenterics, a superior and inferior artery, and then return vein. Here's your inferior mesenteric vein. And they simply are going, those are the vessels we've seen when we've dissected a whole organism and fan them out, and you see that clear membrane with a little bit of fat pad running through it with vessels kind of running through the mesentery. That's why they're called that. They're going to all the intestines. So when you go to return blood from the intestines, they're either going to come in from the lower half into the inferior mesenteric or from the upper half of the intestines into the superior mesenteric. And that's the main ones to keep in mind. There's a splenic vein where you think that came back from the spleen. So let's take a look at this circulation a little bit closer. One of the vessels involved in the portal circulation that's taking blood from the aorta out to organs of the digestive tract is the celiac trunk or the celiac artery. It's one of the first branches that come off of the aorta as you pass through the diaphragm, and it quickly splits into three branches. You're going to have one of those three branches is the hepatic, so we're going to call it just the common hepatic artery. One of the branches, like that's the hepatic artery going that way. One of the branches, it's a small one, but it's going to the stomach, the gastric artery. And then you're going to have a branch that goes all the way over here to the spleen, and so it's the splenic artery. So the celiac splits to the stomach, the liver itself, and the spleen. So that's going to be part of the portal circulation. And then notice here is showing a branch of the superior mesenteric. This picture doesn't go far enough down to get the inferior mesenteric. So I wanted to show you that whenever you went a branch of the celiac or either one of the mesenterics, that you're involved in the return blood, you're involved in the portal circulation going back through the liver first. So here it is again, a little bit further down. This is showing your superior mesenteric right here, and there's your inferior mesenteric. And then notice there's just branches that come off of that. Right colic would be to the colon, ileocolic, referring to the position it's in. Left colic, intestinal arteries. You know, don't worry about those. Sigmoid is another word that refers to the curve in the stomach. So all of these are getting their names, excuse me, from just various parts of the digestive tract and the intestines. So all of these are involved in the portal circulation. So anything going off into something digestive has got to return through the portal circulation. So the blue here is just showing all the return. Coming back into the inferior vena cava. Here's your gastric veins, splenic veins, inferior mesenteric, superior mesenteric, all joining up and coming into the hepatic portal. And notice how the hepatic portal veins go all over the liver, and then they come together into hepatic veins, and then you're back into your superior vena cava. So you got to have let the liver have a chance to process all this stuff. Come on, what else? Oh, maybe that's it. Yay, we're finally through with this one. That's it. I hope you've learned a little bit about tracing the blood, and thanks for hanging in there with me. You will probably be asked to trace a drop of blood maybe more than once by your instructor. I know I'm going to give a pop quiz that they know about. It's not really pop. The next time I see my students, and then I will do it again when it comes to the lab practical. Everybody will have to trace a drop again somewhere.